Mweletse Mbeki says land issue is just a ploy to get votes. Do you agree?
I think the lesser we entertain madness, the better. We must not entertain sickness of people who sing for supper and just go and make some inflammatory statements that do not reflect reality. The land question is a historical question that must be resolved, and at least black parties are beginning. Unfortunately, I'm making reference to liberal jurists who want to protect this liberal constitution at all costs, whereas majority of the members of parliament
of South Africa for
it is a liberal. Yes, it's a liberal constitution which sought to protect the economic interest of those that lost political power in 1994 but retained economic power. So that is how it was designed. It was a product of negotiations and selling out in certain instances.
The ANC goes to a 2-day conference, comes back with resolutions. Are you encouraged? Are you happy? Are you getting what you want?
Look, I think that the ANC is zigzagging on what we agreed upon in Parliament. So the National Assembly on the 27th of February took a resolution to establish a constitutional review committee to do 3 things. One is to review and amend the constitution in order to permit for expropriation of land without compensation. 2 is to look into constitutional amendments that will deal with land tenure. And it says there that they must take into consideration that the state should be custodian of all South Africa's land. And that 3, it must report back to Parliament by the 30th of August 2017. That is what we're instructed to do. Now the ANC is zigzagging and saying this, and whether we must amend the
why are you saying it's zigzagging? It went, it had a 2-day conference, it's going to its national executive, and it will come back and say, no, we don't want
the reason why we're saying that zigzagging is because they are now saying that they're going to try to attempt to implement expropriation without compensation within the current constitutional framework, whilst more than 70% of public representatives in the National Assembly said go and review and amend the constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation. So that is a fact in terms of how the whole process has been dealt with.
Hold on. You're holding a gun to me and to the rest of South Africans. You're saying, oh, it's a fait accompli, it's already done. So there's no need to go and have
that is a principal agreement which the representatives of more than 70% of voters in South Africa resolved on the 27th of February this year. It's not me saying that, it's a resolution of Parliament which I've got a copy of, which is accessible, in the parliamentary website in minutes in terms of what was resolved. But of course, like the ANC always does, they've got a right to could zigzag and
but they've also got the right to apply their minds and come back and say, oh, why are we changing the constitution? We can expropriate without compensation.
Now, the constitution that they are saying must not be amended, they want to implement and expropriate the land without compensation. Yes. Says in section 25(1) that no one may be deprived of property by any law, except when there's law of general application, right? And then part 2 of that says that if the state expropriates, it must be for public interest and purpose, but that must be subject to compensation. And the monies of that must be agreed upon by the people who are affected. So that's what the Constitution says. There's no confusion about it. So I don't know what is this narrow legalistic approach which the ANC is trying to apply to a political problem.
I've had several jurists, Advocate Thembeka Ncukaitobi the other day, Ruth Hollett plus others, have said exactly the same thing, that, oh, you've got all these other mechanisms, why are you going for this particular one?
Unfortunately, I'm making reference to liberal jurists who want to protect this liberal constitution at all costs, whereas majority of the members of parliament
of South Africa for
it is a liberal. Yes, it's a liberal constitution which sought to protect the economic interest of those that lost political power in 1994 but retained economic power. So that is how it was designed. It was a product of negotiations and selling out in certain instances. That is why Section 25 is one of the areas that we say that must be looked into as part of the new regime of change.
South Africans who voted for a party that continued with it, or 69% under Thabo Mbeki in 2004, don't seem to have a problem with that constitution.
But the party,
so you might think it's liberal. All I'm saying is this is the constitution we have.
The party that enjoys 62% support in South Africa has now said that there must be expropriation of land without compensation. They came out of a conference with such a mandate. But now you've got technocrats and charlatans and all sorts of chance takers who are trying to interpret it in an opportunistic way, and even inviting liberal lawyers to come and advise them in terms of what should happen to this otherwise progressive resolution which they took out of their own conference.
Let's move on. I mean, I don't know if I want to say Advocate Nukaitovi is liberal and all these other names, but it's your opinion. Yes. Can I ask you, Julius Malema once said in November 26 that if you see beautiful land, when he was addressing a meeting, he said, occupy it, it belongs to you. Do you worry that these kinds of utterances would have an adverse impact on the economy and so forth?
You know, you must look into the constitutional court judgment that dealt with the issue of land occupation in South Africa. It actually forbade the state from evicting people who have invaded land if it has not done so within 48 hours. So the Constitution and the Constitutional Court appreciates that from time to time people will occupy land, and that is a struggle which we encourage as the EFF. They are beneficiaries currently of land occupation programs that happened post-1994. You would know that majority of the times black people got to settle comfortably in the so-called townships now because of land occupation. Almost everywhere, even where in Winnie Mandela informal settlement, even Soweto was a product of land occupation program. So we're encouraging that within that particular context in terms of what's happening.
For example, a week and a half ago in Proteas land.
We encourage that if people are congested in informal settlement with no proper infrastructure, but there is land which is not being utilized, they should occupy that. That is the policy position of the EFF, and I'm not apologetic about it.
The government of the day says this land is at the moment being considered for human settlement, we will put in the infrastructure that's necessary. Shouldn't people say, we believe in this government, we voted for it, we're going to wait?
You know, you must understand something which we propose as a sustainable resolution as the EFF, right? We say that the first step is that we should amend the Constitution to permit for expropriation of land without compensation. And then secondly, we must then pass legislation which will give land tenure to the custodianship of the state. It happens in many other countries. Here in Mozambique, the state is in ownership of all the land. Yes, and I'll give you context of why that is necessary. Is because an attempt to redistribute land piece by piece, even without compensation, will dismally fail because it will be subjected to individual court challenges in terms of what should happen. So let us take all land and put it under the custodianship of the state like we did with the minerals in South Africa. You will know that the Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act of 2002 took all mineral rights to the hands of the state, and whoever wants to mine in South Africa has to apply for a license. We are saying let us do to land what we did to minerals in South Africa in a much more durable and sustainable way. And then the redistribution agencies of the land which is under the custodianship of the state can be national government, can be municipalities, if agreed upon can be the traditional leaders as well, depending on what will be the submissions of the people on the ground.
Yes. Out of 257 municipalities in South Africa, only 7 actually work.
Look,
and you want me to put the fate of land redistribution in the hands of those municipalities?
We can have a far much more clearer mechanism in terms of what becomes the redistribution agents or agencies in terms of the land that is under the custodianship of the state. But let me tell you something that you do not know, is that the land surface of South Africa currently is about 122 million hectares. The state controls about 25% of that. And a lot of investments, by the way, in South Africa currently goes into land that is owned by the state in special economic zones, that is owned by the Department of Public Works, and what is owned by the Department of Fisheries and Forestries. Almost all plantations where forestry business is happening is leased to the businesses that are doing that, and the state can reclaim that and give to whoever wants to do plantations and forestry business in the manner in which they want to do it. So there is that model, but in a small portion of land. land.
Okay.
That is why I was saying let us expand the custodianship to all the land and give access to all people equitably. If you're going to do it on a case-by-case basis, you will not be able to redistribute the land. We'll speak 20 years later, we'll still be stuck in a situation where black people gain access to just a small portion of the land.
This is expropriation with compensation. You're going to take all the land, then you're going to say, oh, Justice, your house is worth so much on this. And then because Justice lives in Johannesburg, he gets a bigger amount. Mama Lala in Hammanskraal gets, oh, no, yours is there. So you're going to empower the rich. Thank you very much. Can I ask you one quick question? Mweletse Mbeki says land issue is just employed to get votes. Do you agree?
I think the lesser we entertain madness, the better. We must not entertain sickness of people who sing for supper and just go and make some inflammatory statements that do not reflect reality. The land question is a historical question that must be resolved, and at least black parties are beginning to appreciate that we must take back our land without compensation. The ANC just has to reform its ideological outlook. It will get to the table properly and we expropriate land without compensation for equal redistribution.
Floyd Shivambu, always a pleasure. After the break, our comment of the week. Stay with us.
Charlatans and all sorts of chance takers who are trying to interpret it in an opportunistic way.
So there you have it, guys. Our African leaders try to do their best, in their speeches and try to make speeches that actually to show, their efforts in trying to help manage the challenges which Africa is actually facing through and has been facing through since the colonial times. And so we here to really listen to these speeches and to share our thoughts in the comments. And so whatever it is you guys think about these speeches, please do share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please share and like and subscribe, because that's the way you support Kwazemi as a channel, an Afrocentric channel, where we try to understand deeper issues in African history and hopefully develop a collective intelligence on how we wish to build the Africa we want to see as people of Africa. See you in the next one.